Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 53 of the Meet the Parents podcast and your weekly chance to catch up with some of your favourite parents bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm talking to John from Dad You Geek and Vicky from Verily Victoria Vocalisers. Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
So this week, again, we're going to talk about some of the highs and lows of being a parent. We liked it so much when we did it last week with Hannah and Mark that we thought we'd do it again. So as we touched on last week, parenting is a journey during which we all experience our share of ups and downs, but each of us has different stories to tell. So this week, with a change of personnel, we're going to do what we did last week, and I'm going to ask each of us to highlight some of our own personal best and worst experiences from our time as parents. So John, let's start with you. Why don't we just kick off by reminding us what the structure of your family is?
Yeah, no worries. So the structure of our family is very, without being a cliche, modern family. So there's myself and Mel. We've got two daughters. So one's Ashley, who's 21, and the other is Katie, who is 12. Ashley isn't my biological daughter, but she's very much my eldest daughter and the least challenging of the two. I'm going to get shot for saying that now, but definitely the least challenging of the two. And that's us really in a nutshell.
Yeah, obviously you've got lots of years of parenting experience under your belt, and I'm sure there have been lots of highlights. But if you had to name, one or two particular highlights, what would they be and why?
I was thinking about this prior to today while I was travelling into London, and I think one of the biggest highlights for me has to be Ashley and the young lady that she's turned into, and that is such rewarding as a parent to see her grow and the way she's gone through life and dealt with all of the challenges that have been thrown in her way. She done really well at school, really well at college, but decided university wasn't for her. But even while at college, she worked part-time in mother care and done really well there and was really well thought of. And that's just continued, and her career's just continuing to blossom. And she's being an ideal employee in a way, which with my business head on is everything she's saying to me and all the feedback she's getting from work is just really encouraging and makes you feel proud as a parent that she's turned out like that. But thankful as well that I've actually got a daughter who's got a really strong work ethos and really loves working and has got a hunger for it and is really driven. And to be honest, it's what I hope Katie continues. Katie's very driven in herself, and I hope she continues in her sister's footsteps. And I end up with two wonderful girls that are really driven and strong-minded in the field of work that they decide to go into.
Yeah, so any particular highlights with Katie that you'd want to flag up?
Katie is the way she takes life in her stride, in that she's had quite lots of difficult friendships as girls do at school, and she's bounced back from them really well. For years now, she's been saying she wants to be a doctor. It kind of changes into what field of being a doctor she wants to go into. At the moment, she wants to be a forensic pathologist, which seems a bit gruesome to me. But she started off about 3 or 4 years ago, stating that she wanted to be working A&E as a doctor. So as a result of that, as soon as she could, she joined St John's Ambulance and continued to flourish. I am always and have been a really proud dad of the girls that I've got. And people often say to me, "Oh, do you never want a son?" But no, not the relationship I've got with the girls and the closeness. And Katie is my twin. If she is properly mini me. If you see the pictures of her that I share on social media, unfortunately, she's inherited my looks and she's very much got my sense of humour. She's a very, very miniature version of me. Yeah, she probably won't thank me for when she's older, but
two very strong and determined daughters that you have to be proud of, and actually what Ashley's done as well is demonstration that university is great and it can offer you lots of opportunities, but it isn't necessarily the only route to success and happiness and a fulfilling career.
and neither me or my sister decided to go to university. Both had the opportunity to, but my sister went on to work in the city and was very successful in the city. And I didn't choose to go and work in financial services. Nobody ever does, I don't think. But I ended up in financial services and doing pretty well, I think, with the career that I've got. Foolishly, I started working at RBS, thinking, oh, brilliant, I don't have to study anymore. Now I'm working. And I think it was about 3 days into the job, they turned around to me and said, right, here's a list of exams you need to take. And I have warned my daughters of that, but Ashley's very aware of that because she works for an industry board that does lots of exams. So yeah, it is rewarding to have these two strong girls, but it does come back to bite you on the arse, really. Now you tell them to do something and they come back with reasoned arguments about why they shouldn't be doing it. You're kind of thinking, oh, crikey. So yeah, I'm completely outnumbered in this house. So I need to choose my battles very carefully nowadays because pack mentality kicks in and Dad gets it in the neck.
Vicky, let's move on to you. Let's recap the history of your family to start with as well. And like John, you have a modern family.
Yes, very much so. There's me and Ross. Ross and I have been together for 6 years now, just over that. And Grace was 4 when he came into her life. She's now 10. And we're expecting our baby together. I'm now 31 weeks pregnant. So not long, but we've been trying for quite a long time. And the other difference in all of this is the fact that I'm having an IVF baby from an egg donor. So, yeah, ultra modern.
Obviously, you're now 31 weeks into what is a rolling 9-month highlight at the moment with the impending birth of a baby son and a brother to Grace. But are there any other high points that you'd like to share with us?
I think probably one of my high points was realising that I could be a single parent. Grace was 3 months old when I had to leave home, and she and I spent the first year or two with my mum. But then I moved into a place of my own, and actually I was obviously understandably really worried of how on earth am I going to do this on my own. But I had a really good network of support, and Grace and I just had I think I'm grateful for those years that I spent just with her and me, because I think it helped me. Well, it helped her. And I was very much able to be totally open with her about lots of different things. And I think it formed her into the person she is today. She's one of those people who's very adaptable. And I think that comes of being a single parent, and then obviously having to go off to see the other parent at a weekend and things. And when I was a kid, I was always very clingy. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do this, that, the other. She's just breezes along as if nothing can faze her. And one particular highlight of being on my own with her was when we used to go up to Savile Gardens, which is near Virginia Water, where we used to live. We just used to run around the gardens there and play fairies and just stand on drain lid covers and pretend they could transport us into another world and just stuff like that. It was just the memories I have of just me and her are just really lovely.
And I guess there's a lot of highlights that have happened since you and Ross got together as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without him. I mean, I'm very grateful that I didn't ever think I'd have a proper father figure for her. I just sort of got to a stage where I resigned myself to the fact that I could very much be on my own for the rest of my life. And as a result, she wouldn't have, a proper father figure involved directly in her life for, as in a family life rather than a disjointed one. So meeting Ross, I mean, we were very careful when we met to make sure that we didn't introduce her to him straight away. We wanted to make sure we were solid with each other first. And we did it as a gradual thing. And I think as a result of that, that's formed the bond that they have now. I mean, sometimes I feel left out the way they are with each other. I'm just thinking, well, why am I here then? But she's such a mature girl, and she's always been very pragmatic. She, at the moment during my pregnancy, she won't let me touch anything, pick anything up, do up my shoes. Mum, what are you doing? Be careful every time she goes off to school. Don't you do anything silly. She and I, we have our girly nights, and I think that's partly why she's happy she's having a brother, because it means we can still have our girly time together and go off and do shopping while the boys do manly things, as she said. So yeah, it's been, I mean, the whole thing has just been completely different to how I thought it might turn out. And I'm just eternally grateful for having somebody as solid as Ross, who's got a very good work ethic. And I think to an extent so have I. And as a result of that, that's rubbed off on her too. She won't miss a day of school. We offered her 2 days at the end of school last year. We were going to go on holiday a bit early, and she went, no, I'm not losing my attendance record.
Cool. I guess as for me, there's two highlights for the price of one, which is the way I was able to experience the birth of our first two children at home. Heather was adamant that she didn't want to give birth in a hospital, and thankfully we had a local midwife who was very pro-home birth and supportive. So Isaac was born late one evening in a birthing pool in our dining room after actually a relatively smooth labour. And I got to hold him as soon as he was delivered without lots of hospital staff fussing around. And we got to spend our first night together as a family in our own home. Now, second time around with Toby, things didn't go quite according to plan, as things kicked into high gear so fast that we didn't even have time to get Heather into the pool, let alone wait for the midwife to arrive. Now, thankfully, earlier that evening, I'd watched an episode of an American TV drama which instructively featured a birth scene. Now, I can't say that Toby's birth was quite the same. There was no group of actors in matching pristine surgical gowns gliding purposefully around the delivery room in beautifully choreographed slow motion to the strains of Coldplay. Nonetheless, I didn't pass out. I had enough of my wits about me to project an air of calm reassurance, remind Heather about her breathing, and to be in position as Toby manoeuvred himself into launch position with one contraction, crowned with the next one, and finally, with a deft wriggle of the shoulders, slithered gracefully out where I was waiting to make the catch with a towel at the ready. Job done. And I dined out on that story for weeks afterwards. But seriously, both times it was an amazing experience to be so closely involved with the birth process, with the added bonus of us being in familiar surroundings. Cara would have been born at home as well, had events not conspired against us. Heather's waters broke while she was at the hospital for a checkup, and I have to admit I didn't enjoy the experience anywhere near as much, having been at home for the first two. Spending our daughter's first night at home while she stayed in hospital was very different to how it had been with the two boys, and it really brought home how lucky I'd been the first two times around.
Yeah, I say to him, I remember that after Mel had cesarean with Katie, that being sent home from the hospital on my own and waking up in an empty house was very flat, and I was just like, oh, what now? And I wasn't allowed back up the hospital until a certain time. It was really bizarre.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? It should be one of the biggest, proudest moments of a father's life, but so often you get to spend that first night on your own. Anyhow, with the highs come the inevitable lows. We each have moments that we're not proud of, or that we'd rather pretend had never happened. The first time you lose your toddler in public, a code brown at the local swimming pool, when your 4-year-old asks you very loudly, "Daddy, why is that lady so fat?" and the woman he's referring to isn't pregnant. Some moments are merely embarrassing. Others are a lot more serious. An unexpected diagnosis, relationship troubles, postnatal depression, and we all have them to some greater or lesser degree. So, John, let's start with you again. Have you had any particular lowlights that you'd like to share with us?
The ones that sprung to mind for us was very much to do with other members of the family being ill. Unfortunately, both myself and Mel have lost aunts that were in their early 40s to breast cancer. The first one, Mel's aunt, Mel was very close to, and Katie was at a very young age when she died, and it kind of meant that Katie wasn't really fully able to understand what exactly was happening. And for a number of years afterwards, whenever somebody was going to hospital or she knew somebody wasn't well, she would get anxious and worried and think they were going to die. And that was the really hot thing I wish we'd never had to go through. And it's how you explain to I can't remember how old Katie was now. How do you explain to somebody that they're so fond of that they're no longer around? And that was one of the hardest things for us. And even scarier was when my mum suddenly got very ill and ended up in hospital for, it was a good couple of months. Katie was very anxious during that time and was always wanting to go up the hospital to see Nanny, to make sure Nanny was okay. And she wouldn't take it from anybody else that she was fine until she'd actually been up the hospital and seen her through her own eyes and spoken to her. Regardless of what you said, she wouldn't have believed anything you're telling her. And I think some of that does then back to when me and Mel went away for one of my work conferences and I had an accident. And only Mel was there to pick her up from school because Daddy landed back in the UK and then was admitted straight into hospital. So I think all of that combined, I just wish we'd never. I wish you never had to tell your children bad news about relatives and loved ones close to them's health.
They're really tricky situations to deal with because it is, as you say, it's so difficult to explain it to a child, and you can never quite be sure how they'll react. We've been going through something quite similar with Toby after one of his grandmothers died back in January. Whereas both Isaac and to a lesser extent Cara were able to articulate and at least outwardly express their grief, Toby, being the introvert that he is, bottled it all up inside, and it wasn't until 6 or 7 weeks later that it all came tumbling out suddenly one night. We've had episodes ever since where he'll just break down for no obvious reason. It's not clear, it's not apparent what the triggers are, but something just sets him off and he gets very worried, he gets very insecure, he keeps asking, if I'm going away for work, am I going to be coming back? And it is so difficult, and it's the first time that he's had to process this kind of emotion. He still can't quite find the words to say it, and this is from a child who is extremely articulate normally. So I can sympathise. It's such a difficult thing to put any child through, and it's one of those things where you almost don't want to take that innocence away from them, do you?
No, you really don't. And certainly with Angie, who was a lot of Mel's family lived down in Wales, so we quite often spent most summer holidays down there, so they had a very close bond. And then suddenly, as Angie was going through her chemo and she started to lose her hair, Katie knew something wasn't right but didn't really understand the consequences. And then when it finally happened, it was a very much a parenting low. But we didn't really want to lie to them and tell them an untruth that something else was going on, really. But it's when you tell your children about the facts of life and what actually happens that you can no longer shield them from their innocent world that they live in.
And it's difficult because ultimately you do have to be honest with them in some way, don't you?
You do, because if you're not honest with them, I'm under the impression that it will come back to bite you on the backside in the long run. So much so, I think a big regret for that was when Angie's funeral happened. We was talking with Katie and saying, do you want to go to the church? And Katie was very much of the opinion she did. And as soon as she saw the coffin, she was in hysterics. And I instantly thought, why didn't we just leave? Why not just stay at home with her? And it's too late by then. And that still haunts Mel, I know.
Yeah, and that's always such a difficult decision to make, and you never know whether you've got it right or not until you're actually there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vicky, what about you? Any particular lowlights from your perspective?
Yeah, I think probably my lowest point would have to be my pregnancy with Grace, and then obviously the breakup. I was not treated well at all, either emotionally or physically during my pregnancy. And then when Grace was born, it was just persistent nastiness and me sort of going between home and my mum's and trying to decide what to do. And then the fallout from leaving as well, all the nastiness, the court cases. I mean, I was still taking Grace to see her father because I knew that he should have a relationship with her, but the abuse of me carried on. So I then had to stop it so that I was protecting myself, and said that he could go to a contact centre to see Grace. And so then we went down the legal route because he didn't agree with that, or that he'd said that he was going to take her to another country and all sorts of things. So I didn't trust him. And then, of course, we had to go through a whole court case of him trying to get proper contact away from the contact centre. And it just took a very long time, and it made me ill. I mean, I lost my legal aid and I had to act for myself. And I was acting against a solicitor based in London who'd act for Guy Ritchie in Madonna's Divorce. So you can probably imagine how hard that was. And eventually, after about 18 months, we finally I had to sort of take gradual steps, and I had to take a bit of a leap of faith. And luckily, I had a very, very supportive CAFCAS officer who was really lovely to me. And it took a while, but eventually, time, as they say, heals everything, and time moved on, and it got easier. I mean, there's been ups and downs over the years, but, and I don't think it's ever going to be easy, because I don't think a breakup is necessarily. So yeah, it's been tough, but I think it's made me into a different person, and it's certainly made Grace quite strong. But I was adamant that I didn't want her to have to choose between me and her father. I had to do that quite a lot with my own parents, and it made me feel rubbish. And I never wanted her to feel that way. I always wanted her to make her decision and make her own mind up about people, because her relationship with him is not my relationship with him.
From what you've said about it just then and in the past, I think you've got a lot to be proud of for the way you handled the situation, because it's so easy in a breakup when there's a lot of negative feeling, it's quite traumatic, there's a lot of anger sometimes, and what you did was to put Grace's feelings first and maintaining the relationship with her father, which isn't an easy thing to do. But by keeping Grace's relationship with her father and allowing her to explore that side of the relationship on her own, then it's got to be the best thing for her in the long run.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't want her coming back to me one day and saying, "Mum, you never let me see my real dad." That's not fair. And I know it wouldn't have been fair. And I don't want her to come back to me one day. I'd rather she sort of grew and understood relationships with people and who people were, and grew to know what was right and wrong in her own mind.
Yeah, and I guess it must have helped as well in terms of putting her in a good place to help her build a positive relationship with Ross.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, it's sort of helped her understand relationships. I mean, her father has had a lot of sort of disjointed relationships with other women over the years, and obviously mine's been very solid with Ross over the last 6 years. So she's seen lots of different angles of different relationships with different people, and she can then in her head feel like she knows where she wants to go with her own life, I think. I've never hidden things from her, but I've also been very careful about how I've put things to her so that it's not, she doesn't feel bad about who she is. Because, I mean, with what I've been through with him, I don't want her to think that she's come about as a result of anything bad. It was good, and it was her who helped me see what was happening and open my eyes to things and made me realise that what I was in was wrong. So, I've got a lot to be grateful to her for.
Yeah, and I guess, it's testament to the way that you've made a good decision and taken a good path in that respect, that Grace has taken what could have been a very negative experience and turned it into a really positive one. So having done this last week, I get to go twice. So last week I talked about my current difficulty of dealing with how much Isaac is changing now that he's 9 and some of the hormones are just starting to kick in. But that's probably the most recent low light, but it's not the hardest or the biggest negative part of being a parent for me. I think in many ways the toughest thing to deal with has been trying to juggle all the competing priorities between kids and work, and investing enough time in both my marriage and myself. Now there's no question that Heather's and my lives have changed enormously since the kids were born. Now, and so much of that is undoubtedly for the better. But with neither of us having family locally, it means we've rarely had any respite from having the kids around. Not that I'd change having had kids for 1 second, but for years it was a big effort even to organise an evening out to go out for dinner. For 6 years we basically always had one child under the age of 2 in the house, each of them at various times with peculiar sleeping habits that made us think twice before leaving them in the hands of my parents or a neighbour or even one of their carers from nursery. And even now we don't go out together that often, and while we've been away separately, we've never had a night away together away from the kids in 9 years. And
wow,
as much as I love them all, that does exact something of a toll over time. Heather does go out with friends at least once or twice a week. To be honest, that's something I've always encouraged her to do for her own sanity. And, I'm occasionally out or away with work or blogging stuff. But if there's one part of the family work, us, me relationship that has been neglected over the 9 years, it's probably the us bit. And I think that's been tempered to a certain extent by the fact that we'd already been together for 15, 16 years, and we didn't have kids early, so we've had plenty of time to enjoy being together. We've done lots of travel and all that sort of stuff pre-kids. But I think we probably would both benefit from having a bit more downtime together as a couple, and that's been in pretty short supply in recent years. We spend so much time being mum and dad that it's easy to forget sometimes that we're husband and wife as well. Yeah, that's probably been the toughest aspect of parenting from my perspective.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really hard because, not being away with each other, to have time for each other, that's not an easy thing. I mean, I'm lucky in the fact that, Grace goes off to her father's and Ross and I get some time to ourselves. So that's hard.
Right, we're not finishing this podcast on a negative note, so let's finish up by doing a quick run around the three of us, highlighting another positive of our time as parents. So, in 1 to 2 sentences, give me one more personal high point of being a parent. So, John?
You're not going to like this one.
Oh, God, here we go.
So, for me, it's introducing my girls to my love of Tottenham Hotspur.
I thought you said it was going to be a high point.
The high point is the pride I have to see them take an interest in football. And okay, Ashley, not so much nowadays, and she's found other interests apart from football, not to mention boys, but she's currently in Spain with her boyfriend. But Katie is very much an out and out Spurs fan, and it's a joy. So I say my parents, my dad, it took me and my sister when we were from a very young age, and that love's continued so much so that me and my dad have got our season tickets. We've had them for 20 odd years. And now Katie is part of that circle. So when my dad can't go or I can't go, she's there, front and centre, ready to, for such a quiet girl in public to actually, when you see her on the terraces, to let go and sing songs and shout. And that's my highlight.
In all seriousness, it is great because it is something that brings 3 generations of your family together on a regular basis. So to have that kind of shared interest and passion is, I think that's something we want for all our kids, whether it's football or any other interest or hobby that we have. How about you, Vicky?
I think I've just got to say that being blessed with the opportunity to be a mum again, it's taken us so long to get here, and the fact that I have, and we've been on the journey we've been on, makes me appreciate it so much more than I ever thought I would. I mean, okay, any woman who's having a baby appreciates it, but seeing the darker side of not being able to get pregnant and losing, having 2 losses and then failed IVF and all the rest of it, to actually be successful and look forward to the fact that I'm going to have my second child, because I never really only wanted one. I've always wanted more than one. And the fact that I've been blessed with that is just more than I could ever ask for, really.
Must be that a little bit sweeter, knowing that it's on it. Yeah. You're in touching distance now of holding.
Yeah, he's a wriggler as well, and he's blooming hurting me at the moment.
He wants to have his 5 minutes of fame on the podcast.
Yeah, it's the karate kid in there.
Yeah, and we've all got our fingers crossed that all goes smoothly over the course of these last 9 weeks or so. So, for me, it's actually just being part of the blogging community, not just the friends I've made along the way, such as you guys, but actually also the vast range of parenting experiences that I've been exposed to. And I've learned something from all of them, I think. I've been exposed to a far broader range of parenting than if I'd interacted with only my real-world friends. Life as a parent and my style is much better informed as a result. So there you have it. A few of our highs and lows that show just how varied our experiences as parents can be. And hopefully some of what we've spoken about has struck a chord with you too. So before we go, What have we been up to recently? John?
This is getting boring for me now because every time you ask me this when I'm on the podcast, it's work. But it's work, and straight after this, I'm going back to reading more governor reports as a school governor because the school I'm a governor of has got Ofsted coming in tomorrow, which will be very nice.
Good luck with that. How about you, Vicky?
Yeah, mine's all been about my pregnancy, really. I had an antenatal class on Saturday for the day. It was quite nice to refresh my memory and enlighten Ross to the world of antenatal classes. And and then a tour of the maternity unit on Sunday. So that's what we did. And then I had the health visitor around to say hello to me this morning. So it's all starting to happen. It's all sort of, getting ever closer. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, oh no, I haven't got much time left before I've got to do all these things.
It'll be gone before you know it.
I know. It already has, pretty much. So, won't be long.
It's been a varied week or so for me. Last week I got to spend a day at Facebook's London offices where they have spectacular views out across the city, meeting rooms named after quotes from the Lord of the Rings books, and their very own free-to-all pick and mix sweet trolley. And it's probably just as well we don't have something like that in our offices, as I can only imagine how much weight I'd put on. And this week it's all about preparing for the Blog on MSI conference in Manchester, which takes place this coming Sunday. I'm going to be presenting a session on promoting and advertising blogs, or at least I will if I ever get round to finishing my presentation. #winging it again. And that's it for another episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the three of us online. John?
dadyougeek.co.uk and then dadyougeek on all social media. Take your pick.
And Vicky?
You'll find me, Verily Victoria Vocalises. The URL is vevivos.com, and I'm on most social media as @VicWelton.
And you'll find me at slouchingtowardsThatcham.com and on social media as @ThatchamDad. You can download this podcast on iTunes and Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. Do please give us a follow on Twitter @ParentsPodcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. Anyway, thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.